The American Adoption Congress, 13th International Conference, April 11th to the 14th, 1991 in Garden Grove, California. This is program number D, 151, tape number 56A.
Mom came and reclaimed her baby, and I'm also going to talk about, because we now have 8 years of openness with all of our birth families, what that process is like in terms of traits that are helpful in making it work, making it a success. This is Sarah. She's the birth mother of Jason, our second child. She'll share her experiences with 2 crisis pregnancies.
I didn't know that.
And this is Jason's
You were wondering
birth
what I was
mom.
doing here. No, I thought you were adopting.
No.
Wow.
And Anne.
An informed panelist.
Anne is an adoptee who will talk about what it was like growing up and
No wonder Jason was following
search
us.
and what the reunion is like. And gosh, we're so small. This is going to be nice. Why don't we just,
She's going to share with me later.
Okay.
Why don't you guys come down here with us?
Yeah, why don't we? Why don't
I
we?
birthed mom too.
Are you great?
Open adoption 3 years.
Oh, good.
Wow, neat.
Okay.
Wait, she's glad. Oh, thank you. I'm a maternity counselor.
You're welcome.
And I've just heard a lot about.
Now, I wonder, can we just start?
You go first.
Do you guys want to come and sit down here? Maybe they're comfortable.
No, I want to be behind.
Oh, they have to take.
No, yeah, because we have to have this thing, I think. But you know, what I want to do is we'll have you guys share too at the end, because in case I don't. Normally we've done this before.
Love to do that.
Are these
No.
are most of the conferences that you've been to heavily attended?
This is my first.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
What about within?
Oh, you mean
within-
The workshops?
There's so much that
Yeah.
time goes on.
Yeah.
Exactly.
At the beginning, yeah.
A lot of late showers. And
Yeah.
especially after lunch, because the workshop I was in just before lunch ran a half-hour late.
Oh my gosh! So
I'm
nobody
sure
had
a
a
lot of people
chance.
are taking long lunches.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I saw a lot of people. The restaurant out here was still full
Yeah.
when I walked through, so I'm sure that's part of it. If you give me scissors, I would really appreciate it.
No, I
Not my
don't.
personal. You want to try? That's okay. Thanks. I've been very frustrated. I had a very intense conversation with a woman in a snack bar up here, which was wonderful. Oh, thanks.
Well, is this being recorded right now?
I think so. I think that they just.
Oh, that'll be good. It'll go over big. Okay, well, I guess we'll just have to start it like as if it were a regular one. My name's Sandra Lennington. It's a privilege to be here, even though it's just us. It's kind of nice because I don't know if you guys are as burned out as I am, but you know, it's just kind of like emotional overload at this point. I want to make, let me just expand a little bit on what I was saying about what we'll do. I'm going to share what our experience as adoptive parents has been, and Sarah will share what her experience has been with 2 crisis pregnancies. She's parenting her daughter, who is 6 now. She just turned 7. She just turned 7, April 2nd. And then with her second pregnancy, which
Don't give too much away.
I won't, and what that experience has been like for her over the years. And Anne is an adoptee who has searched for and found her birth mom, and she's going to talk about what it was like growing up in a closed system, what her experiences were, what it was like having a reunion, and maybe even more importantly, some of the issues that have come up post-reunion and what that's been like and where she is now. I think I want to make one sweeping, all these generalizations are my own point of view, I will preface that, and so feel free to disagree. I'm real happy, especially to be here at the American Adoption Congress, because I feel like this organization is beginning to embrace a wider and wider audience or groups of people, and I think that's really important because I think, and this is I also published AdoptNet, which is an adoption, right?
It's one of those
Yeah, and the philosophy underneath that is the same as what I want to talk about now, which is that, you know, the birth parents have been over here, the adoptees are over here, the adoptive parents are over here, and the professionals, agencies, and attorneys are out here, and everybody's going like this. And my feeling is that until we can really begin to even listen to, I mean, that to me is the first step, to listen to, even if we don't agree with what the other people are saying, there's not going to be any change that's going to be positive or lasting. So that was the basis, that's the basis of this workshop, and also the basis, and what I think is really important. I think that so many of us, including, and I include myself in this, have been wounded by the system. I think we have to own those experiences, grieve them, and that what we really all need to do is I think the bigger crime is that we just stay in that one place and don't use it, make it useful for something that's positive. I think then the whole thing is lost if we don't do that. So that is, those are my sweeping observations. I'm going to be as, this is a little bit different, and we've presented this at the NACAC conference, which is for mostly adoptive parents. So I'm going to take a little bit of a different swing and try and go relatively quickly through my story, and then spend most of the time talking about the ongoing contact and some of the problems, and not problems, but there are different issues that come up when you've got an open situation. I grew up in a family with a secret, and the secret of our family was not adoption, but it was another A word called alcoholism. And the reason I bring that up, and I haven't really mentioned it before at other conferences, is that I really see that the same kind of dynamics of don't talk, don't feel, don't trust were experienced by me in that family growing up. So that when I came, and I also might add I'm a recovering alcoholic, and what happened for me was that in 1965 I became an airline stewardess. Back in those days they called them stewardesses, you too. And we all went to this weight doctor who used to shoot us up and give us uppers and downers, and that's how I got started on drugs, and then it went into booze. And in 1973, I married. In 1981, I got sober, clean and sober, and that was a very important year for me. 9 months after getting sober, my husband and I, on December 18th, were on an airplane on our way to Paris. At that very moment, unbeknownst to us, our first son was being born in Texas. It was a private agency. I had contacted the agency. We'd passed the home study and everything with flying colors in spite of the obvious problems that were a part of our family. And when we got back from that trip, the social worker called and told us that we had a son. It was wonderful. We picked him up in Monterey, brought him home, and actually I didn't think about the birth mom, really. I mean, back in those days, they didn't talk about birth mothers, and I didn't really think that much about her until about when he started about around a year old to look like a real person, and I went, here's this child, he's a year old, and I began to wonder, well, where's the woman who gave birth to him? And what is she feeling? And what is she experiencing? Hi, I'm Sandy Lennington. I'm an adoptive mom, and I'm talking about our experience in my first son's adoption and how we opened a closed adoption. That's where we are, to bring you up to date. So, and I also began to experience an emptiness that I could never, and I still to this day can't put words on it. I just felt like something was missing, And my husband and I travel a lot, and we'd be going to airports, and I'd be looking at every blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman, wondering if this, is this the birth mom? Is this who gave birth to him? And then there were a lot of things that were happening with this agency that we were involved with. First of all, they told us two different stories about where he was born. One said he was born in Germany, one said he was born here, and then they told us we could write letters and we could put them in the file, and the agency would pass them on to the birth mom if the birth mom contacted them. Well, we found out later that the birth mom had written a letter, it was in the file, and they never acknowledged it. And at that point, and the other mix-up was our social worker died of cancer, and she didn't even realize that we hadn't even gone to court by the time he was 2. So when we went to court, our attorney had the birth certificate, and I saw the birth mother's name, and I knew then I would never forget it. And when we found that letter in the record, I said to myself, I'm going to find this woman. She may reject us, but I have to find her. For myself and for him, I did it, because I felt like if I could find her, I could save my child from all the grief. Now this is down the road. I'm gonna jump ahead down the road, because I want to say it is not true. I'm not saving him from he's having to go through the same issues, even in an open adoption. But there is a difference. The difference is that he has got real people that he's dealing with. He's not dealing with some fantasy in his head about who this person is. So that, in fact, did not happen, but that was part of my motivation. The other thing that was happening to me was this incredible fear. And for those of you who are not adoptive parents, this hopefully will be helpful in understanding why adoptive parents are so closed. And I really feel of the triad, the adoptive parents really need the most education. I really feel that deeply, which is another reason for my doing this AdoptNet thing. I was afraid that I would find his birth mom, and that his birth mom would look just like him. And when he saw his birth mom, he would bond like glue to her, and he would be gone. And my need, though, to find her overcame that fear. It was an incredible fear. And the interesting thing that happened was when we did find her, she looks exactly like him. She does, and it's wonderful, and it's wonderful. And the wonderful thing about, and Sarah is our second son's birth mom. She's going to share later. It's the wonderful thing, and again, I can't really put words on this. It's wonderful to see the things that the kids do that are like the birth family. And I don't know why it's wonderful. It is. It just, it makes me feel connected. It just supplies something that's missing for me. I'm going to be jumping all over because something else just occurred to me that I want to, and then it just went out of my head. I wanted to jump ahead to some of these other points. Well, I'll get to it later then. But anyway, it's nice to be able to see that. It's like there's nothing missing in a way, and it's fun. It's almost fun because Jason has a shriek that's just like Laura's, and he gets this cute little expression on his mouth, and I can just see Laura a lot, and that's Jason's birth sister, and it's just really nice. So anyway, I knew that she'd been in the armed services, so I knew I was in the Air Force, so I wrote to the Worldwide Army Locator, and they provided me with an address, and so I sent her a letter. And the other thing that also happened, which happens I think frequently, is that my parents or the grandparents put a lot of pressure on us not to do this. They told us we were crazy, that she would come and steal him back, that why did we want to ruin something that was so good, and everything was just fine, and why did we want to disrupt everything? And they did allow us to go, I used their address because I didn't know, and at that point, obviously this is back in to the early 80s anyway, I didn't know what I would find. I never knew a birth mother. I never knew one, and I didn't know. I thought, well, if I had given birth to him, I would want that, but I didn't know. So anyway, I just sent a letter saying, this is going to be a shock. We're the people who adopted your baby. If you want contact, we're open to it. And in fact, it took quite a while for her to respond, and she said yes. But she was very reluctant too, because I think, because of what the agency had told her, she didn't know either. So we began corresponding, letters, pictures, and we found out that the things that the agency had told us about her were wrong, not on purpose, I don't think. They were just misinformation, and in other words, we all had misinformation all around. It was so. it was real helpful for us to get those facts straight. And then we went on in 1986. We met Sarah and Rob, and I won't go into that story because Sarah has her own story a lot. And we had an open adoption with Jason, and in '87 we were fortunate enough to adopt Julie, also in an open adoption. We have open relationships with all, not just with the birth parents, but with the birth grandparents on all sides. And I think the birth grandparents, and nobody has written about this much, but to me, what I experienced in all these is the birth grandparents have a much more difficult time dealing with their emotions. And I don't know whether it's just because they're an older generation or what, they have a harder time. They have more emotions for some reason. I don't know how to put it. I'm not a researcher or so.
Control.
Is that what it
too.
is you think that might be? Yeah.
With the parents also, they don't have as much control in the decision making and.
Yeah, and they do have a hard time. And this actually just this last year we met for the first time Jason's birth great grandmother, which was, well, yeah.
Triad speaks out.
Right. This is the triad. Yeah. So that we do have our third Julie's birth mom is on SSI disability and has got a lot of emotional problems, which is why she's on disability, and her parents are also have some problems, and well, we all do, you know. I mean, but we're all in touch with each other. And I think, let me just briefly talk about some of the things that have happened on down the road that I think kind of, some of the good parts of having openness is, for example, last year, Julie's birth mother was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. Her birth grandmother was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. If we had closed record, even if we just had openness at the beginning and then that was it, we would still be lacking this information on the about the medical records. So I think for the medical records, it's really, really important. The other thing that's happening, I think that's going to be a little bit different because of the ongoing contact, is something that happened last year with our oldest son, which is another thing that I didn't really expect. We have frequent telephone calls, like with Mary Kay, who's been in Germany for 4 years now. So we were going to call her, and Jamie seemed real reluctant. And I know he loves her, and you know. So I was going, and he's not a kid. He's a real outgoing kind of kid. He's not a kid who's overly concerned about feelings, emotions. He's not one of these kids who asks questions. And this is another one of my pet theories. I really feel like that the asking of questions and the wanting to search has a lot more to do with individual temperament than it has to do with any kind of bad or good treatment or any other thing. I think Jason probably and Julie would be a lot more interested in emotional contact and connection. Jamie just doesn't seem to be, and I don't think it has anything to do. Initially, I thought he wasn't asking questions because it was all open and there was nothing to ask about. But what I'm finding is that it's more, that's the way he is about everything. It's not just with adoption, it's with everything, and I think it has to do with his personality a lot more than with anything that's, you know, good or positive, good or bad about what we're doing. But anyway, to go back to this other point, what I talked to an adult adoptee, actually. She had sent me an article about abandonment fears in adopted children. And all of a sudden a light went on, and I'm going like, you know, I wonder if this is what all this reluctance is about. And since he's 9 years old, I said to him, and this is what I've had to do all along, is, Jamie, I'm wondering if if I were you and I knew my birth mom, and at this point she had been married, she'd been married for a couple of years and she had her own little boy, I would be wondering, I think, if my birth mom might be coming back to take me. And I wonder if you're afraid that, that's what's going to happen and that maybe you will lose us as a family. And I said, I want to let you know, because by this age at 9, he's able to understand legal things at this point. And again, a lot of this depends on where the kids are cognitively, how old they are, in other words, that legally that's not possible. That Mary Kay made a decision that was based on where she was at that time, and that she feels like she made a good decision, and that she knows that you're happy here, and this is where she wants you to be, and this is where we want you to be, and this is your family, and there's nobody who's going to come to take you away. And after that time, everything seemed fine. Then he was willing. Then there seemed to be no problem. And I'm sure other issues are going to come up too, but I just mentioned that as one specific one that has come up. And again, one that I wouldn't expect to come up, and one that probably doesn't come up, and maybe Anne can speak to this a little bit as an adopted child, might not come up if you're in a closed situation where you might, not know that that's possible. I don't know, maybe she can speak to that later. I also want to say that what's important, I think, in us having good relationships with so many families, it is difficult in that, just logistically, I mean, when holidays come around, there's so many more people in this family that time-wise, it takes a lot of time and a lot of thought to make this happen for Christmas and having relatives over, because there are so many relatives. It's wonderful, though, I think, for us and for the children, and Sarah can talk about her side of it. But I think that I'm going to just real briefly run down some of the traits I think that are helpful. One is the issue of trust. There has to be trust both ways. And the other thing is that you have to also, in addition to trust, I think you have to, these are just, good relationships with anybody, and that's essentially all this is just good family relationships. There has to be a recognition that there is no ownership of this child. And this is true in any family. I mean, birth families, it's the same if I had a birth child, that I don't own that child. That child is his own person. And I think recognizing that on all sides is real healthy. I think the one thing that's real helpful for us, in most of our birth families are real respectful of us as a family, and they show the respect in that they don't come in and try and say, okay, you're doing this wrong. If I were the parent, I would be doing this, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. We have had to set limits with Julie's birth mom, because she was like initially calling us like 4 or 5 times a day. I mean, I had 3 young kids. I mean, time-wise, I couldn't do it. I couldn't be her support, and unfortunately, she had refused counseling, and so we were her main support, and there wasn't anything. I mean, you can't take her bodily to a counselor, but we really had to, it got to the point where we had to put an answering machine on our phone, which we really regretted to do, but there have to be some boundaries there, so I think that's another important point. The other thing that helps is a lot of flexibility, because in relationships they change over time. There are times when Mary Kay doesn't necessarily want to, initially there's usually this intense, initially when you first like at the first reunion, and then there's a lot of intense interaction, and then the other person may need to get like she was getting married and she needed to have time with us not involved. I mean, that was important, and we had to respect her boundaries there, and we had to not push ourselves. The other thing I think that's been hard to do for us is that the relationship has to go, you have to respect the person who wants the least amount of contact, because in some cases, like with our oldest son's birth grandparent family, I would like much more contact. I would like to see them. I want them to come, and they can't handle it, and I have to respect that. I can't push myself on them, and it's been a hard lesson for me to learn, and they've been very kind with us in saying, finally she said, it's just emotionally, it's like having a grandchild, but we don't really have him. And while I can't understand it because they're welcome to have as much as what they want, I have to respect it. And so we've only written, and that's all the contact. Although this Easter, Jamie got a card for the first time with the name grandson on it. And I think it was real special to him because they're now 8, 9 years down the road, they're acknowledging that, yeah, he's his grandson. And I wonder, too, because Mary Kay had a son and then she had her tubes tied. So this will be it. And her brother has no children, and it seems, I haven't asked, but I'm assuming they're not able to. And so it looks like these will be the 2 grandkids. So whether that made a difference or not, I don't know, but it's very special to me and very special to Jamie that they've included him. And again, this is something that is happening over time. It's not something that's that you can push, and you have to wait for the other people. I think that those are the main points. I want to just conclude with one quick letter. How are we doing time? Oh, okay. With a letter that I got actually after I started the Adopt Nets. I got this letter, and it's a very special letter to me because in the first issue of AdoptNet, I shared what I've shared with you about our story about finding Jamie's birth mom, Mary Kay. And I got this letter in the mail, and it really meant a lot to me because I think it speaks to the change in the professional atmosphere that was happening. And I received this in August of '89. As I read the lead story, Breaking the Silence, which is what our story was about, in your recent newsletter, I was taken back in memory to a long winter's plane ride in a bumpy storm with a tiny baby boy strapped to my chest in a snug lee pack, making his way to his new parents. My thoughts at the time, as this tiny child slept so peacefully next to me, were of his 2 mothers, and how connected they would always be. One had given him life and sent him into the world healthy and full of promise. She gave him his looks, his personality, his predisposition for certain talents and temperament. The mom yet to be was to give him his future, his values, his place in the world. I thought about how they were linked to each other, and that my job as a caseworker was to promote a respect they might have for each other. How nice to know that on their own they were able to make this connection, and that their concern for each other and for their son brought them together in their shared role of providing full circle for their boy. At that time, adoption was just beginning to struggle to be open, and meetings between parents were few within agencies. Many of us in the field have known instinctively that the secrecy we participated in was uncomfortable and felt disabling, and yet for years we're stuck in a system that perpetuated that philosophy as all they know. Things are different now, and the women in Mary Kay's position will never again have to give their child to an intermediary, but rather can plan from the beginning to know the child's future firsthand. I'm sure she would have wanted to had she been given that choice. I'm sure of it, in fact, for the child I brought home to you was her son. And it was written by the social worker who had brought Jamie to us. So it was really nice.
Okay, I'm going to give the birth mother story, but that was wonderful, first of all. I always enjoy hearing that. My story, as Sandy said, starts when I'm 16 instead of 18. When I was 18, I had Jason. But when I was 16, I found myself pregnant, and that put me into a marriage of convenience, which was fun for about 6 months. And then things started to get really serious. I put myself into high school. I was going to finish high school, and that's where I got my first introduction to adoption. Bruce Rappaport, who heads the Independent Adoption Center, came to visit us and talked to us about adoption, and I was pregnant at that time. And I remember seeing the resumes for prospective adoptive parents and thinking, God, I almost want to do this just for them. You know, they seem so needy of a baby. That was my impression at the time. But I just couldn't. It wasn't a choice for me at that time. I think I was too young to really realize what I was doing. Anyway, so my marriage was a marriage of convenience, and I knew from early on that it wouldn't be a long-term marriage, that things were going to be, that it was going to be hard. And I had a lot of yearnings to grow up like everyone else did and go to school, especially education. My marriage was really unfulfilling. However, raising Laura, my daughter, was really fulfilling, and I really enjoyed that. So by the age of 18, I enrolled myself into college. I never did finish high school, but I took my GED, and I enrolled at a community college in the Bay Area, and was just starting the community college and was really excited about that. And then at 18, a couple weeks after I started school, I found out I was pregnant again. And for me, it was a huge, huge crisis just to find out. And I knew I was pregnant probably 2 weeks after Jason was conceived. And, but I didn't, it was very difficult to deal with and confront, and I didn't really confront that until I got the results back of my pregnancy test. I remember listening to the nurse and thinking, you know, I just cannot raise another child. It was impossible to me, and I didn't, and so, and because abortion was not an option either, I knew that adoption was going to be my option right away. And people respond to that with, well, she'll change her mind. But I was so sure that this was what I was going to do, even though very few people believed me. But all of those feelings of being pregnant, again, all of those familiar feelings I had at 16 were back. I was feeling hopeless and scared and not knowing what to do. I had discovered that my husband was on drugs and was not going anywhere. So I contacted an adoption consultant, and she says, oh, sure. She says, there are people that will want to adopt your baby even though you're married. That was one of my concerns, was the fact that I was married would turn people off to adopting the baby, thinking that I would want to change my mind. And so she searched for an adoptive couple, and while she was searching, I just sort of put it in the background, and I tried to ignore the pregnancy. It was still pretty early on. And then we met with a prospective adoptive couple, and we met at a restaurant, and they had not really dealt with their infertility yet. They kept asking us questions like, well, what if it's a boy? You know, as if that would matter. And just questions to you know, that thinking that we would change our mind, and telling us not to spend too much of their money, and that kind of attitude. And we felt really uncomfortable with it, but Rob wanted to go through with the adoption, and I wanted to go through with the adoption so badly that we decided to just go ahead with it anyway. Well, a few weeks later, they changed their mind. And so we were back in the same position. And Betsy Harrison, the adoption consultant, tried to look again and called me a few weeks later and said that, look, you know, you're married and nobody's going to want this. Everybody is going to think that you're going to change your mind. So why don't you call us back a few weeks before you're ready to deliver? Which is just like an agency adoption, really. And but I wanted the parents to really deserve this baby, and I don't know if you know what I mean by that, but really want this baby and to trust me, as Sandy was saying, that trust is very important in this relationship. I didn't want to be used, and I felt that way, and I wrote her a long, long letter. And but this adoption consultant couldn't help us, and she was very well known, and so I felt even more hopeless. And by this time I was about 4 months pregnant, and I was showing. And I remember sitting in the bathtub, and I had been crying all day, and I couldn't feel the tears coming down my cheeks because they were numb from crying all day. And I thought to myself, I have to do something about this. And I got out of the bathtub, and I got back on the phone with the Crisis Pregnancy Center, and I said, you know, what can I do about this? And so she put me in touch with a lawyer whose name is Drummond McCunn, and he's absolutely wonderful. And through him, I decided I would choose the parents through him because I liked going through him. He told me that what I was doing was very unselfish, and that I should be proud of myself that I've been so strong and so on, and that really helped me. It was a lot of encouragement from him. So he set us up with Dick and Sandy. He says, I have two people in mind that you would love, and why don't you come over to my house for dinner, and you can meet them at my house. It'll be a very relaxed atmosphere. He said, well, I guess I better call Dick and Sandy since you're coming this Friday. He says, oh, and I guess I better call my wife. And so on that Friday, Rob and I went down to Drummond McCunn's house and met Dick and Sandy, and it was a little awkward at first, but I liked them right away, as he said I would. And what I liked about them was there was this attitude of anything you need, you let us know. And there was that trust that both of us were going to take a chance with each other. And that's what you're doing, when you first meet each other. And it was clear this was the beginning of a relationship. Of course, I had more security on my side because I had the goods inside. And so I really knew that this was going to work out, much more so probably than she did. Because I knew that they would be good parents. And because of my past with my father, I'm a little bit more distrusting of men. And I thought, I wonder if Dick is really a genuine person, a good person. And I walked around the corner while we were at Drummond McCunn's house to the living room, and he was sitting on the floor playing with Jamie. And you could see the interaction there was really something neat. We went shopping together. We had fun picking out maternity clothes, and she went on my doctor's appointments with me and listened to the baby's heartbeat, and that was really neat. But at the same time, the pregnancy was difficult. Probably the best time I had when I was pregnant was with Dick and Sandy, and we really our friendship really grew through the pregnancy. I didn't think I was going to go through a mourning period because my attitude was, just get this baby out and let me get on with my life. And I don't know whether most birth moms go through that or not, but that was sort of my attitude, that I just wanted to go on afterwards. And I didn't really think that I would feel some sadness after he was born. But after I had him, I really did. And I cried for about 2 weeks. And then one morning I woke up and I felt really, really peaceful, just like that. And I've never had any regrets about what I did. Because I know, mostly because I know he's in a really safe place and he's with people that can really take care of him and nurture him. And he's really special to me. He looks like my little brother. Looks exactly like my little brother. It's neat to see. And the counseling that I had during my pregnancy helped too, to really prepare me for it. Even though I wasn't really prepared for the mourning, it prepared me as far as my attitude on how to look back at things. And in talking about what I was wanting to do, really made me feel secure about my decision, hearing myself. They paid for all of my expenses. I think that's really important as far as being used. You could feel really used if you pay for your own expenses, I think. I took about 10 months. It took me about 10 months after he was born to see him again. And it was a neat reunion. But I didn't feel like I do with my own daughter. I'm really bonded to her, and I'm not with Jason as much. I think he's just a really special kid, and he's got neat parents. I want to say something about the difference between agency and open adoption. I have a friend who went through agency adoption, and she went away and paid for all of her expenses. And every time she looks back, and she looks back quite a bit on the adoption, you know, you can tell that in talking with her that there's this real sadness and real mourning and not knowing how he's doing stays with her. I don't have to think about that. I mean, it's really peaceful for me. It's something that I can really put behind me, which I think adoption is designed for, you know, to put behind you, to say, okay, this is something that needed to be corrected, and now it's corrected. Not that pregnancy is a mistake at all. I mean, I really learned from this experience, and I developed really good. I don't have a good family experience. I developed a really good family experience from this. Sometimes a birth mother's sole support is her adoptive parents, and through working through this problem during your pregnancy, I think, is really important. And had I chose abortion, I don't know that I would have been able to do that. And I think that, so I think that this is a much better choice than agency adoption. And when I meet adoptive parents and they are just pro-agency adoption and they don't believe in open adoption, I really have to doubt their character. I mean, I really think, why? You know, it seems so selfish to me. You know, it was just the attitude behind agency adoption is all for the adoptive parents. They don't keep in mind the woman who gives birth. They just don't. I mean, if you look at what happened to Jane Roe, she had her hands strapped while she was having that baby. And that gives adoption a very, very negative view for women. And so I think this is a much healthier decision.
This is the end of side A. Please turn your tape over and continue on side B. The American Adoption Conference, 13th International Conference, April 11th to the 14th, 1991 in Garden Grove, California. This is program number D151, tape 56B.
Maybe what makes me different is that I don't feel like justifying what I did because I don't like what I did, the decision that I made. Maybe that makes me more questioning of her decision. I don't know.
And she hasn't been honest with you in a lot of ways, and I think that really makes you suffer when she can't be honest with you. So who can you trust?
I didn't mean this to be a therapy session. I'm sorry.
Well, whatever works. You know, the other issue I think that has come up for me actually through this whole workshop is the situation of, because many of the are like you, are things that happened 20 and 30 years ago. And I hear social workers and people from agencies feeling attacked by the other groups, which is coming back to the same attack situation. And people, I mean, for me personally, my feeling is that we're all doing the best we can with what we've got at the time we do what we do. To carry that on, you know, once we realize we've made a mistake, to hold on to guilt and that kind of situation. I mean, we definitely need to own our responsibility in making the decision, and then once we've owned it, grieved it, done whatever, if we have to make amends as much as what's possible, then it has to be accepted, and then you move on from there. And that's how we learn. The fact of people, groups, you know, after agencies, or this one's after the attorneys, or this one's after the adoptive parents, to me, this is, again, I know I'm going back to what I said in the beginning, it's just not productive. You know, it's not productive. I understand that the emotions are there. That's the thing, kind of hard to get the emotions to catch up with the rest of it, but
I think it's kind of interesting that this is kind of a small group, because I think that just kind of goes to show too that a lot of the people associated with AAC, and I'm not meaning this really bad, it's just kind of an observation, don't want to hear about this. But I think I was talking to Ken Watson in the last session I went to, and he says he knows the records will be open, and after that, AAC needs to move on, and I think this is where it needs to move on. And next, Sue and I are going to put in that we would like to talk about open adoption, and we would and we want to bring a birth mother, Watson.
Bring me.
Yeah, we want adoptive parents, we want birth mothers, we want birth fathers, and everybody, and be like a keynote speaker, so everybody would have to listen to it. Because this is where adoption is going, and it's through their hurt and pain that we're evolving to this, and so that my children won't have to go through that, my birth mothers don't, and I don't have to go through that.
I think something that I'd like to see that would probably help with this, because like, we get people on different sides, and I think if this were a room of adoptees, I would feel there would be even more argument here. I'm not saying this right, but what I'd like to see is, and I can kind of put this together in my own life. One best friend is a birth mother. My other best friend had a shotgun wedding, and as a 4-year-old, I had an abortion. I'd like to see women with each possible type of experience together talking about it.
Not necessarily defending their decision.
Yeah, but just to have talking about the different experiences.
And how they did it.
Single parents, a single girl.
Yeah, that too.
Exactly.
That too.
Because the girls who are finding themselves pregnant now, need all the options available to them. And like someone was saying to me at lunch, there needs to be advocates for all sides.
Right.
Yeah.
Actually saying what's good about each one, instead of like when you go to an agency, the person you talk to is a believer in one side, and they're going to push that side,
Right.
because one person can just have one strong point.
And pro-choice clinics are not presenting adoption as a
No, not at all.
And they're not.
I worked in one.
Yeah.
I worked in one, and I was there for 4 months, and I only heard one person considering adoption. And I was ready, willing to say, open adoption, let's talk about it, and let's go through all your options. And the girls were coming in, either I'm having an abortion or I'm keeping my baby, with their minds made up.
But they've never been given the choice, and that's part of the problem, and that's part of what we do at Birth Connection, is show you the choices. You may come into us and say, I want to do an adoption, but we say, well, that's fine, but let's talk about the other choices. Not abortion necessarily.
That's what my counselor was doing with me all through my pregnancy.
Parenting, with help from your parents, parenting with your boyfriend, parenting on your own, parenting with, Medi-Cal or, whatever some kind of assistance. And we'll explore that, and we'll also explore adoption.
Well, I think this speaks to your point too, Ann, and I think you're right, because I think there are a lot of people out there who don't present the, let's get some help for the pregnant woman, and let's let her, if we can, bring somebody in to support, for if it's just going to be something that's temporary. I think that's not. And I think the National Committee for Adoption, I hate to say that word in this place, but I think that's one of the points that they've brought up that I think has some validity, which I at the NACAC conference shared a workshop with Mary Beth Cedar. It was and Kate Burke, actually, the three of us on a panel, if you could see that. Anyway, her point is that these young women are being used. They come in pregnant, and the attorney is over here with the money, and they're being, presented with that. And exactly, and the other problem is, you've got an attorney representing a birth parent and an adoptive family, and that, that's not very,
And that's
it's
how
not
it
a
is with
good.
independent adoption in Chicago too.
And
it's adoption, it's not
It's a
option.
business, right, it's a business, and it's not, and the women are not being given.
We have a lot of places like that in California that give lip service to what I feel, that we do at the Birth Connection, and that's real sad. We would eventually like to not have to have adoptive parents pay for our counseling services or educational services, but we can't operate. We operate on pretty shoestring as it is. I mean, but we would like to move forward and to not having to do that like Ken Watson
Mhm.
does, and it's hard, but
I liked what he had to say,
Yeah,
I really did,
he's-
and I did not know at the time that I played Steffi that there were agencies out there that didn't charge the adopted family. I mean, I just took it for granted that they all had to. And it wasn't until he said something that I thought, you know, I probably would have liked to have found one, even though I'm very, very happy with the family I have, so I wouldn't go back and change it.
they're feeling far between.
Yeah, I guess so, I guess so.
Yeah. But and we really try to keep our costs down, and, and we don't, we're not exorbitant at all. Not
Open
at all.
adoption, to me, looks like it tends to be a little more expensive because
It can-
it's ongoing. I mean, you don't slap a child into a family and then say, okay, you guys are off.
Yeah,
You know,
because we do
it
counseling for
continues.
life.
Yeah, for
Our
Ellen.
commitment to the birth mother is for life.
I can go to Ellen. I mean, I can go up to her 10 years from now. I'm Terry in Phoenix, and she is going to know exactly
Yeah.
who I am, and she is going to, it may take her a few minutes to remember everything, but she cares about these people, and she puts a personal stake in matching up people that are going to be good for each other, because it's just her. She doesn't have a company to fall back on and say, well, where the computer matched them up wrong, It was her that did it. So she really educates these people. When she showed up at my house, she had 3 books ready for me to read. She said, okay, read these and see what you think. She was wonderful. Wait, see if she's sitting behind me. Talking about you like that. But the one thing that came up yesterday at one of the general sessions was that Sharon Kaplan, had said that she hoped that people didn't go away with a negative impression of open adoption, because I think she's right that when it first came out, when it first started being talked about, it was wonderful. Everybody painted this rosy picture, like you said, of it was beautiful and it was a cure-all and it always worked and it was good for everybody. And now we're starting to come out with some drawbacks, with some things that are having to be looked at, and they're calling them problems. And I hope people don't go away thinking that it's a messed up system, that, oh, we tried it, it was great at first, but now it sucks, so let's just dump it.
Mhm.
I'm thinking that there are problems, and I'm experiencing some of them. And I
We
hope
have
we
problems
just,
in every day.
Well,
exactly.
yeah.
We
just
confront
need
them,
to
we
work
work through them.
Right.
Since the
ways
women's
to deal with
movement,
them.
ever since the women's movement, I don't think that we could ever go back to just agency adoption, to close the
Close
system.
adoption. I know.
Because I don't
we
think
should.
women will put up with it anymore.
I hope they don't. I think there are
Most
some who
women.
will. But like when you were saying that you just don't understand how an adoptive family can want a closed adoption, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I don't.
I mean,
think
the guilt
that
must
they're
be-
relying on their birth mother having to go through therapy.
Right.
They're relying on that,
And
and
I
they're
think-
saying that that's okay.
They have to realize, too, adoptive parents have to realize that the way of the future is the way of the birth mother. And if that's what she wants, and that's what they do want,
Yeah.
that's the way it's gonna have to be,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
educate,
a lot of them are
educate,
choosing
educate.
it. A lot of them are choosing it because they wait 6 months instead of 7 years.
Yeah.
And hopefully they're learning something in the process.
Yeah, I think we all are. I mean, I'm looking at all these women who have searched and had reunions, and I'm thinking that is probably why the open adoption movement has become kind of strong, is because of all these women who are going through all their hell
Yeah.
to try to reverse something they did 20 years ago.
Right.
That now we're going to have to try to avoid those types of situations and say, okay, let's fix it when it starts, rather than having to go through 20 years of agony. Of thinking that you can just close the door on it, it'll go away, and you won't ever think about it again. Start accepting that it's not going away.
Right. But the bottom line of this whole thing is the child and what's best for the child. And it's best for the child, and it saves them a lot of trouble
Right.
if it's open.
Well, I just
know,
wonder,
it's a
Ann, let me
start,
ask Ann, because this is something that I wonder about. I still have doubts in my mind about, and as I said, I think my 3 children, I mean, their temperaments are very different. I've got one very, very emotional, one that's sort of in between, and one that's just, like out there and, real sports oriented. And what, from your experience, do you think would be important for me, like to watch out for? Is there anything, I mean, and this is a hard question, is there any, I guess what I'm wondering, because I don't know anybody else who's had, like ongoing long relationships like what we've had. I'm wondering what would be important, like from, say, for Jamie as an adoptee, for me to be either looking out for, or like what are some of the things that you wish that had been done in your case?
I wish my parents had brought the subject up. The subject came up when I brought it up. I wish they'd told me everything they knew when they knew it. I wish they had been okay with it, I wish they had resolved their infertility, so that they could be okay with it. It would have been wonderful for them to have been okay enough with my adoption to allow contact with my birth mother, to allow her into our house, or to allow letters into our house. Would have been a symbol of their having processed enough to be okay with it, and they weren't ever okay with it. And in a sense that really felt like they weren't okay with me. I never, and I'm sure you've all heard this many times before, but there's even in the best adoption, there's a grief process, and I wasn't allowed to have that until I was, over 20. They didn't think there was anything for me to be upset about, and I had daily tantrums for many years as a young child, and they didn't know why. I mean, they had me at the shriek when I was 4 years old, and they didn't know why. I mean, it's obvious to me now. What else? I think it's hard. The two hardest things about being adopted are identity and loyalty. And I don't know how those things play out in open adoption.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
Because I have no experience being an adoptee in open adoption.
I think that kind of depends on the birth mother's attitude towards the whole thing. I mean, I know that Diana's working very hard to work my image, and not necessarily me, because I'm in Arizona, but the idea of me into her family, and say that there's somebody else out there that is like Steffi, that has a part in all of this.
I'm curious, as a fellow birth mother, what you think about a 15-year-old or a 16-year-old knocking on your door someday.
I've been asked that. It all depends on what she wants.
Yeah, I know.
It's kind of like why they're like, what happens if...
It's just really freaky to me.
Because you guys have open adoptions, you're not going to be.
It's not that easy.
It won't be a surprise, but I've been asked...
It won't be a surprise. I mean, you're going to be in their lives the whole time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I've been asked, what if, as a teenager, Steffi gets in a fight with her parents, which she will.
Oh,
yeah.
She is going to
I've
argue
been
this,
asked.
and she decides, I'm going to go back to my real mother. Terry won't do that to me, and comes and knocks on the door and says, I want to stay with you now.
But kids do that anyway.
I just don't know how.
Or even, I'm going to go with my grandma. No, you're not. Get in your room and put your stuff away.
Right,
So
right.
am I going to be
I
really
will
strong
say
enough
go
to
home
say,
to your mother.
No. Go home
I'm
to your
worried
mom.
about-
She's disciplining you now. That
Right.
is her job, not
Right.
That's
mine.
what Mary Kay said, just because Dick asked her the exact same thing, because we've been at, that's the
It needs to
question
be
everybody
brought up.
asks
It
you.
needs to be brought up.
Exactly, and Mary
I'm not
Kay
pressing
said,
you.
Mary Kay said he'll go back to his parents' house
Yeah,
and
that's
work it
what I
out,
say
because that's
too.
where it has to be worked
That's
out.
what I say too, but
When if it actually happens, I may say, take him, Mary Kay.
I'm going to say,
I have his bags packed.
Right, take him. Well, that might work though too. The thing of it is that nobody really knows. And who was I talking to? Somebody yesterday who actually did that, and after a week, the person wanted to, her son wanted to come back, and she said, "Oh no, you're staying there for the 2 weeks that was agreed to, and that's where you're going to stay. After 2 weeks, you can come back." And so
I guess if both parties agree, I guess it was
Exactly.
like a slumber party, or can I stay over at Susie's house? But if that was to threaten Diane and Brian at all, and if they were trying to work something out with Steffi, I would not even dream.
yeah, I wouldn't.
So it
my
depends on the
parental values
circumstance. Yeah, depends on.
I wouldn't want to do that, but I have been asked that. Of course, I've also been asked, would you ever go and try to take her back? And
Isn't that
I
ridiculous?
love that question. Or, oh, I have one better than that. I have the best question that I've ever been asked. People ask the weirdest question. They asked me when I was pregnant, if you have twins, will you keep one?
Oh, I've heard that one too, but the best one for me was, what if it's a boy?
You
When I was
know
pregnant.
what, that's kind of a valid question. I mean, I could see an adoptive parent asking you that because you have a girl, you're married. And I can see, coming from the adoptive mom, I could see them asking you that and wanting to know what your reaction. In fact, we just did a
It's
placement
just a
with a girl.
reaction value maybe, so, I mean, if you would have said.
I mean, I could see them wondering
Right,
about
yeah,
that. I
yeah.
mean,
There
I
are-
think that's a real, kind of a valid question coming from an adoptive parent. I mean, I can also but you see, you're so strong in your conviction that you wanted to do that.
There was a trust element there, and that's why it worked so well with Dick and Sandy, because they trusted me.
It is so
When you
nice
said-
to see somebody. It is so nice to meet you.
Because there's a bond there.
Because I felt the same way. I mean, I had people all around me saying,
Nah,
no, you
you're
won't
not
do
gonna
it.
and-
You won't do
yeah,
it. You'll change your
right,
mind. And I'm
right.
thinking, no, I'm not going to do that because I
Just
believe
wait
what I'm
and
doing
see.
is important. You know, and I really had people thinking that I was going to change my mind. And luckily, I was able to convince Brian and Diane, the adopted family. You know, just a few weeks before I delivered, I was able. They were able to see that I was serious.
Let me-
and
What
they
kind of a
trusted me.
reaction, let me ask this is a change of subject, but let me ask, what kind of a reaction do the birth mothers get? And I sort of know from Sarah a little bit what she's gotten, but what do people your own age go, how could you have done that? Have you
I-
gotten any of that,
I
or
get
what?
A little of it. I get,
No.
but not necessarily in those exact words.
What kinds of?
The words I get are, I could never have done that.
Yeah, right.
And what they're trying to say and what they're hoping that I'm hearing is that I could not be as strong as you are. I could not be as I'm selfish. They're hoping that's what I'm hearing, but I know that they mean that in both a positive and a negative way. And I could not be as strong, but also I'm a lot more responsible. You know,
Yeah.
that they mean both things, but they're hoping that I only hear the good one.
Yeah.
My my one birth mother was 15 when she got pregnant, 16 when she had Spencer. And she went to a continuation school in Sacramento that has a teen parenting program. Most of the girls in that teen parenting program keep their babies. So Shannon was a real oddity, kind of. And she had a lot of peer pressure before she had the baby.
Oh,
After.
yeah.
She
I
had-
remember the school. There was one gal that was giving a baby up for adoption, and I was the only one that was her friend.
Yeah,
It's
Shannon.
It's really hard.
It was real hard for Shannon, but she's like you, she's very strong, you guys, she's very strong, and she knew that's what she wanted to do, and there was no changing her mind. But I'm sure it really hurt her. She has an 11-month-old, he'll be 12 a year next month. And we just spoke about 2 weeks ago together, and I brought Spencer. And so there's Austin, Spencer, Shannon, and I. And even there, people are, well, what's he going to think when, what's Spencer going to think when he sees that you gave him up and you kept Austin? And even Shannon said there was still people saying, I don't know how you could have kept that, how you could have given that baby up. And when I came with Shannon and with Spencer to her school, there was one girl and I heard her go, that's the kid she gave away. And
It's
I
like
thought,
a
poor
choice.
Shannon.
It's like they're trying to justify their own decision.
Right, exactly.
Like they're trying
right.
to defend the fact that they kept theirs as
Right.
if that is somehow better or worse than what we did.
Right.
And they have a hard time understanding that it's not better or worse, it's just different because
It's
they're
just-
entirely
it's
different
choice.
people. That if I was her, that I probably would have kept my baby, but I'm not her. I'm an entirely different person.
That's exactly what Shannon
Right.
says, you're not me.
And with
Oh.
how could you give up the one and then 4 years later keep the other one? I think the key word there is 4 years. You're like, I'm a different person now than I was 4 years ago. There's been a change in my life.
Well, for me especially, because
Right.
I didn't give up the first one, and here I was giving
It's
up
a
the
change
second
in your
one.
life. You're at an entirely different point
Oh yeah.
at one time than you are at another.
Right. I speak at continuation schools and so forth quite a bit, and there are women in there that hate me. I mean, they hate me. I mean, they're real tough and they're looking at me like, ugh, you know. And
That is hard.
but you hope that they think about it at least when they go home.
That you
That's
can
what
be
it's
strong
there
and you
for.
can do it, and it is good.
Mhm.
And Shannon is always the only birth mom that has chosen adoption usually.
Mhm.
Yeah, she's usually the only one.
That is, it's so hard.
Yeah.
It really is.
But she's really learning to come out and talk about it. And I mean, just recently, we've really done a lot. We spoke at 2 continuation schools, and then I invited her to come to our seminar. And just in the 2 weeks, her voice got louder, talking about it.
Yeah.
And I thought, and I have known that she's okay with it, and she doesn't mind talking about it, but I just can see the self-confidence coming where she can, speak louder about it. And I thought, you're going on, you're doing well. Yeah. And that's, and I want to be able to share that with Spencer when he grows up.
Yeah.
I videotaped him.
Great. I found that I stopped judging people one step before, unless I went through all of that.
Oh,
That I was real judgmental before that, and a lot of people are. And I think something has to happen, to where you stop looking at people and saying, how could they do that? Whatever it is.
Yeah.
Whether it has to do with children or not, and stop saying, how could that person do something like that?
Right.
And start saying, well, they're different than I am. And
Yeah.
you just have to accept that.
I think
right
that
off.
that a good experience in this option can really make you feel better about yourself. And
Yeah.
I mean, it just boosted my self-esteem because I took a horrible situation, like I described in the beginning, crying in bathtubs and stuff, and make it a beautiful one.
You did. I mean, they have a beautiful
Yeah, I
family.
mean, they waited 4.5 years for Jason, That's a long pregnancy, That's a really long time. So.
I hope that the next conference that there's more of this.
I hope so too, and I really, if you do have that,
Well, we're gonna, that's one of our conferences we want to put on our
Next
stage.
Yeah.
Because I just really feel that this is the way of the future, and that we need to show people that we can do this, it can work. Yes, we will have problems, but it's so much better than the secrecy that all these people have lived with all these years, and they're so bitter and so hateful, and they don't want to listen. And I think they need to get rid of that and go on. And I know it's hard, but I can't imagine for 40 years being that bitter, like these people that verbally attacked me the other night. And that's exactly how I felt. I said, can't you get rid of that? I know it's really hard. I really do know that it's hard. But, can't we go on? Can't you work for a better adoption then? Let's not dwell on that. Let's go forward.
Right.
Like you were saying, they get stuck in.
somebody was asking me, because I had said out of the hospitality room last night, I just made a comment, I said, yeah, open adoption has its problems. And she knew that I was birth mother and that my adoption went really, really well. So her eyes lit up. She goes, like what? She wanted the specifics from somebody who knew, from somebody who actually had the problem, rather than hearing it from people who did not like open adoption, saying, this is wrong, this is wrong, and this is wrong. And I'm saying she wanted to know. And I meant to talk about it here, the one problem that I had that isn't a problem with the adoptive family at all or the system or anything, but that I found that in an open adoption it's easier to kind of gloss over the grief, to kind of just bury it because everything is so nice and everything is going so well and everybody is so happy that you kind of do think to yourself, I really shouldn't be as sad as I'm feeling, so you kind of just forget about that. So the reason I came to the conference was really just to make sure that I was grieving.
Yeah.
That's Ellen talking. That is Ellen Roseman Curtis. You have to grieve. You have to make sure you do that.
I remember that from the counseling.
Yes, so you have to make sure you stages. Because in open adoption, it's very easy not to. It is very easy to forget to do that. And then have it come up later, when you don't expect it.
And
So
better to deal with it now.
Exactly. So I came so that I would I'm thinking, okay, if I wasn't grieving, I certainly will this weekend. If it didn't happen
putting in
before,
your
it's
time.
going to happen now.
Yeah.
And some of it has, and I've come up with a few things. things. But that's the one problem I found, is that it's easier just to ignore it and just to think, okay, everybody else is happy, so I'm going to be happy too.
Well, I'd like to share real quick, I know we're coming at the end here, something that nobody I've ever heard of talk about this is from an adoptive parent standpoint, is not a lot of times, but sometimes, of course, I adore my children, and sometimes I feel guilty. I feel guilty that I've been blessed with the years to enjoy these children at the expense of your grief and Mary Kay's grief. And so for that reason, it's very difficult for me to be here at the AAC. I do find at NACAC, but it's very hard to be here because there's so much feeling towards or against adoptive parents, Do you feel that too? Yeah, nobody really talks about it or says it out loud. At least I've never heard anybody.
I don't think they think we feel like that.
But I feel that way, and there's also times, as a matter of fact, I asked Sarah a couple of weeks ago if there's any time she doesn't if she doesn't regret it, and because I guess I put myself in the birth parent's place, and I think if it had been me, I would feel regret. But again, like what you said, I'm taking my feelings and projecting them onto you, which I think we have to be real careful about. And the same thing with, like what you're saying, I'm taking my things and project. I have a tendency to do that a lot, I think, and just think, well, because this is the way I feel, then you must feel that way. And
I think the AAC is a hard place to be if your adoption didn't occur in the 60s or before, because AAC is focused on that kind of adoption. And I'm sitting here wondering, I'm still just screaming here, and I'm real sorry that I'm still sitting here screaming. And I'm wondering how much of that is in reference to the closed system, and how much of that is in reference just to the adoption period. And how if I had been placed in an open adoption, I would feel differently now, and would I, and how would I?
It's hard to say.
So-
I can't say how I would feel if I had placed Steffi in a closed adoption. I can't say how I would feel if I didn't know who her parents were and if I didn't know where she was. I would probably be terrified.
I can't imagine adoption not being open.
Yeah, I can't.
And it's hard to mix the two. It's hard to get the people from the closed world and the people from the open world and throw them together.
I know that Green Bay has been doing open adoption for 20 years. There must be
right. Or there must
adults.
be people there.
Right.
Well, where are they?
Yeah. Where are
Green Bay, what? Wisconsin? Who? Do you know a name?
They're all resolved by
But
now.
Bryant Bowie, open adoption, so is Jim Gritter's agency, been doing it for like 18 years. He
Oh,
never-
and they're reading our stuff, and they're going, that's good.
They're finally figuring
But
it
I
out.
wish
They're
they
sitting
come
there in
here
their
and
houses.
talk as adults who grew up in that.
Yeah,
kind of
see,
openness.
now I asked that very question to somebody at one of the sessions, and they never told me that. I didn't know. I'd like to talk to somebody who grew
So
up
would
so.
I.
Do you know who Jim Gritter is?
Yeah, I do know Jim. I'll talk to him.
Yeah.
Do some recruiting.
But
What's going on in other states? Is mainly open adoption in just California?
No.
I'm just curious.
Well, she just said it's in where?
I know,
It's
but
in-
We're
as
one
a,
of
yeah,
several
as a
agencies.
law, is it as widespread as California?
Back east, it's not. Back east, there's a lot of hostility.
And I think in the South, too.
New York, what's it like in
I
New
don't
York?
know.
You don't know?
They have some. I went to the IAC conference, National Federation Conference in November, and we had people from 22 states, and basically that was open adoption. And agencies that are closed are now trying to open up because that's what the birth moms want. And I think it will, it's getting, it'll get there. But it's just real slow, and I think probably California is not a forerunner because there's other states that have probably been doing it longer, but maybe we're louder.
No,
California, everybody looks at them.
I'm a social science major, and I study some of these issues, and it's really not that slow. Change takes about 25 years.
I don't know if you were here when
25
we were
to
talking
50.
about
I think it's,
Illinois versus Arizona. I was saying Arizona.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Arizona.
right.
Arizona. Just, well, of course, we're behind everything.
But it's, it just is a process that.
Arizona's also an
needs
awful
be
state to search
ongoing.
in.
Is it
One of the worst
really?
in the country.
Oh,
Yeah.
What?
It's,
Awful
Arizona's
to
one of the worst
search.
states in the country to search in.
Great.
But Jim is in Michigan and they've been doing this.
I'll
for
talk to him,
a
I'll
long
talk to
time.
him.
he'll be on our panel next year too.
Yeah.
Have everybody.
Well, thank you all for.
Thank you. Oh,
And
geez.
thanks.
I don't know how I ended up on the microphone.
Oh, well. Thanks
I
for.
figured this was the really
This concludes this session.